My name is David Neupauer, and I was born in Northampton, Pennsylvania, May 15th, 1948. My father's name was David James Neupauer. My mother's name was Mary Sosnowski. My father was from Slovakian descent. His father came to the United States in the 1920s, worked in a cement mill. My mother, her mother came from the Ukraine in 1917, was sent on a boat by her father, apparently from the Bolshevik Revolution, and was told to meet Peter Sosnowski at Ellis Island. He'll take care of her. They got married. She mothered 8 children. Her husband died after the birth of their 8 children. My mother was the 5th of 8. I grew up as an only child until I was 10 years old. My sister Sharon came along at that time, and then a second sister, Carol, came along 3 years later. So I essentially grew up as an only child. My dad was very kind. More than anything, I remember my father was a very encouraging man. He was very kind, never said a mean word to myself or my mom. And I just remember him as a very kind man. I don't think he was the fastest cat in the alley, so to speak, intellectually, but you wouldn't find a kinder man and a person you'd want to be around more. My mom was more of a perfectionist. My mom really liked everything neat. Things I remember about my mom is she ironed everything, anything I owned. She was a person of detail and high perfection. My mother didn't care for surprises, wasn't spontaneous, and if somebody was to come over to the house, she sure would have liked about a week's notice. I think playing in the band was a memorable experience for me when I played drums in a band. Being on a stage, at first I was terrified of being on a stage. I was terrified of speaking into a microphone. And I think playing in the band, that helped me, I think, in my life. The affirmation I received in grade school, and particularly in 8th grade, and in 8th grade I just had a lot of awards. I was top in my class, and it gave me a lot of confidence, made me think, oh, I can conquer the world. I found out later I really couldn't, but at least I thought I could at that point, so that was impactful in my life. Probably gave me a lot of confidence going into college and just starting life as a young man. Well, when I was in high school, I was 17 and 2 and playing golf. And there was a season in my life when I played golf 6 days a week, and one of the goals I really thought about was becoming a teaching pro at a country club. I didn't pursue a golfing dream because I remember a fella in our neighborhood who held the local course record, and he went to Houston, and I heard that he tried out for the team and he was something like 15th on the list. And I thought, he's the best golfer I've ever seen, heard, or just casually knew. He wasn't really a friend of mine, and I thought, oh my goodness, he can't even make a golf team. Now, Houston had a very good team, but I thought, wow, these guys really are good. The things from my childhood that I remember most clearly is playing a variety of sports with a fellow by the name of Ernie Meltzer. And he was notoriously one of the best athletes in our area. Ernie beat me at everything. And growing up, being around Ernie was actually my most memorable and long-standing childhood memory. He went and fought in the Vietnam War, and I never saw him after that. But the reports from the neighborhood said that Ernie was never the same. That deeply affected me. I chose Lehigh because I wanted to major in a technical field. My freshman year at Lehigh, I commuted, and I hated it. Felt like I was living out of a suitcase, and it was absolutely awful. I felt like my life was totally disorganized, and it's a little unlike my personality, and I absolutely hated it. I was also a math major in the arts college, and I found that that really wasn't for me. I really wanted to move to engineering. I didn't want to waste the credits having taken German. So I became an arts engineering major for 5 years. My second year, as I entered a fraternity that really helped me from the standpoint of living environment, and I thoroughly enjoyed my 5 years at Lehigh. Well, as I matured, got out of Lehigh University, I think certainly the opportunity from a career standpoint, going with Procter & Gamble was significant for me. They looked for somebody that could set goals and meet those goals with others. And the experience at college, particularly being a fraternity vice president and president, probably meant as much to them and maybe to me as any grades or courses I had passed. And that became significant in setting me on a path of management and leadership in the business community. First time I saw Beth was on a Friday night. I was cleaning our fraternity. I can remember being in some grubby clothes and a t-shirt and probably a little bit dirty. And she visited there with a boyfriend, and she was the roommate of Lynn, and that she was the girlfriend of my roommate. And I can remember her smile and her look, and I thought, no, she's pretty cute and I like her smile. What happened was, after I met her the first time, I didn't call her for 2 years. I was dating somebody else, and I called her my senior year or so. I liked her sense of humor, I think, is what first attracted me. I can remember our first football game we went to together, our first date. She spilled milk on her dress or clothes or whatever she was wearing, and she could laugh at herself. She didn't feel like she had an image to maintain, and she sort of laugh at herself. And I always thought, boy, anybody that could just take life that way was somebody I appreciated, because I don't know that I would have responded that way. She was so accepting of who she was and who others were that she was easy to get along with. And at that point, we just started dating, and we never really did break up. We stayed together for 3 years, and then we're married. Well, I think of my wife as very accepting, first of all, of herself, of myself, of people in general. Very much a characteristic of a friend. You don't have to prove yourself to my wife. Most people see her as genuine and truthful, and how can I say, not trying to change. She's not a counselor to people. She's not trying to change who you are, who you're not, but she's very open, candid, honest, straight. I've always said of my wife, Beth, that I felt she could make a wonderful wife for a whole lot of men, because just of who she is. My life with my wife has been, I think, just outstanding. I don't remember that we've ever really had a bad year. I don't remember that we've ever really had a bad season. She might have another take on that, but from my standpoint, I've seen, we were married in 1972, and not every year's been blissful, but every year's been wonderful, and it changes. My love for her, I believe, is greater now than ever. I believe her love for me is greater now than ever, although how we express our love for one another is totally different than how it was when we were in our 20s. We have 9 children. We gave birth to 9 children. 1 died of crib death, and we've adopted 1. We also had 3 miscarriages. So I should say we have 9 children on earth, and I count 4 in heaven. So I've said to some people, our lives are a little bit like Parcheesi. We have 4 home, and the rest of us are on the way. We have 6 boys and 3 girls, and they're all adorable. Our first is David. He's 31, and David is the one who I say at times would be contentious just for sport. He was our strongest-willed child. He always wanted to know what the limits were. If they weren't there, he'd find out where they were. If they weren't established, we had to figure out where they were going to be shortly, because he was going to make us find that out. Our second, Jim, is a very cautious young man. I see Jim as probably the brightest of all of us, yet he's a mellow man, but at the same time highly competitive, aggressive in some ways, but never going to be contentious with people. Our third, Karen, was very much a detail person. Karen is who has a wonderful eye. I remember a story when she was young that we lost a hat, and she looked around and found the hat behind some shrub that had to be 100 yards away. And I always joked that she always had the keenest eye in the house, and if I was going to have a scout, Karen would be it. And she's an interior designer, and I've always appreciated still her eye. She's kind of a reserved person, a little bit quiet, but at the same time, if she decides to be social, she's very capable of that as well. Difference is, for her, it's a choice. For our fourth child, Laurie, who's a daughter, it's not by choice, it's by nature. And if there's a crew of people in the house, I would see that Laurie would almost have to be in that crew of people, probably as close to the center as she could get. She was a demanding child, maybe the most demanding in terms of time and attention. My wife always said that she felt like the Lord spoke to her that if she would invest time with Laurie and walk a mile with her, that Laurie would walk two with others. And I think to this day that's proven to be the case. Our fifth, Andy, was our model. I always felt like Andy always had the most influencing skills of anybody in the family, and even to this day it's hard to get angry at Andy even if he does something wrong. He's a very pleasant, a very personable young man. I think his personality type is one very much of with social grace and aplomb, and studying marketing. I think, likely just being in and around people, that's the kind of thing that's going to suit him very well. Our next is Matthew. Matthew's 18. I do see that Matthew, probably of all the children, I feel is probably closest to my own personality type. In terms of emotion, probably one of the steadier ones. I find that he has an even keel, and he doesn't tend to get too down, although at times he could get angry. Could be a little bit less patient with people. But I think at the same time he's got a very nice manner about himself and really show himself well. Our next, Anushka, she's 18 also, and I find her as a very bright girl, and she was born in Romania. And I find that Anushka would be highly competitive. I think she would make a great lawyer. I think she would make a great debater, or maybe an international diplomat. And I feel like working at influencing others and working for some sense of social justice and maybe helping people that she knows would be on her heart. Derek is 16, and Derek, I would categorize him as the kindest person in the family. I think he has a great sense of humor, very dry sense of humor, and plays off of comments, people, situations very well. And I think he's going to do very well for himself. Scott is our youngest at 13, and Scott is highly abstract. Loves building roller coaster games, and I think Scott somewhere along the way will have something to do with construction, building, something mechanical. He seems to have a very good sense and ability about balance of things mechanically. The one thing I do appreciate about all of the children is I think they're following the Lord, or want to follow the Lord, and that to me is priceless. There's nothing like having a heart. I know we all make mistakes, we all do things wrong, we all sin at times, but having a desire after God and a hunger to grow in the knowledge of Him and grow in a relationship with Him. I could go to my deathbed very easily tonight feeling like each of the children have heard the gospel and are walking with the Lord, and He gives me a tremendous sense of peace. I came to know the Lord in the fall of 1974. Our oldest son, David, was 9 months old. And I feel very much like the Lord used his birth to provoke my heart, in the sense that I would think to myself, what will I teach him? And though I'd been brought up in a Catholic tradition, I didn't feel like I had an answer to that question. I felt like there was a spiritual void in my life. I had a 46-year-old uncle who had cancer. My father took him to a Catherine Coleman meeting in Pittsburgh, and he was healed of cancer, at least for 10 months, to see his second and last daughter married. My father, when he was at that meeting, said something changed for him, and my mother also. It was very significant. My father gave me a book called The Liberation of Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, and I thought, oh my gosh, my father is 47 and he's asking me to read a book. And I thought, there must be something very, very special. And when I read that book, it was basically 150 pages of the gospel, and somewhere along the line it invited us to pray and ask the Lord to come into our life and be Lord. I can remember sitting in the living room on 430 Tate Court in Plainfield, New Jersey, and asking the Lord to come into my life. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was in the fall, September, October of 1974. I feel further than that, so many of the mission trips and assignments he's given Mom and myself. I've loved being in Brazil 6 times. I love the people. I feel like when I was in Russia several times, the last trip there in 1991, traveled with a team doing charity concerts. We did 10 charity concerts in about 14 days. And I received an email about 2 years ago from a fellow that was on that trip who had recently traveled through that same area, and the pastor from Moscow who we served with for those 2 weeks said that to this day so many people from those concerts who had given their life to the Lord serve as key leaders in the church. And when you look back, you never quite know what happens with seed that's planted or events that take place, and then to hear an account maybe 10 years later that says, hey, there's really some result, there's some fruit there. That's very meaningful. Loved being in Scotland. Loved the opportunities I've had to study the Word and under some wonderful teachers, and to teach the Word or to pass it on in some way. And so that's always been very, very meaningful. The most I've been is to Scotland 6 times, Russia 6 times, Brazil 6 times. Been in South Korea, Seoul, South Korea, in Kenya. Been in Jordan, been in Israel. Favorite place I've ever been is Brazil, because of the people. Merv Charles and I were involved with the ordination of 2 young men. I think that's very significant. Merv Charles, I think they see him as their father, so to speak, and I'm probably looked at as an uncle. And while I don't have a real close relationship day to day, I can't speak the language, there's something obviously in my heart with regard to the people there and the work that takes place, and they're like extended family for me. The most interesting experience I ever had was traveling. I was left in Amman, Jordan by Bruce Heckman, who was departing from the airport, and I stayed at the Bible Society. And Saturday the bridge is closed because it's the Jewish Sabbath, and Sunday the consulates were closed. So I was 3 days in a country, in a Bible Society building, in one room with one key, that I couldn't speak the language. I can remember going to the grocery store, and I was looking for cheese or tomatoes or something to eat. And obviously I looked kind of funny in Amman. I seemed to be taller, had no, Western garb, etc., etc. And I walked into the grocery store, which is a very small building and a small room, and I can remember picking up this block and looking at it, not knowing whether it was soap or cheese, and wanting to smell it, but not wanting to offend anyone. And so I could think, wow, this was one of the oddest situations I was in. I was visiting a couple in Beersheba in Israel. That's where was my destination. And of course there's no telephone between Jordan and Israel. And the way I would contact is I'd call Mom from Amman, she'd call them in Israel. And then she'd call me back at the Bible Society, and this is how we communicated for 3 days while I was finding cheese and tomatoes at the grocery store. I've always said that I work hopefully to glorify the Lord, and I work because of our family, and I work for the company I work with, and it's in that priority. And so whatever is achieved in the workplace is of no consequence compared to what you're working for and who you're working for, and that's Him. Professionally, things I'm proud of, I feel like everywhere I've gone, Mom's words, not mine, but Mom said, I know how to earn a profit. I feel like virtually every assignment I've had, I have felt successful in it. I have felt like I've contributed to the growth of the entity, the growth of the organization, growth of the profit, and I've been proud of that. I feel like each assignment was a reasonable length of time. I served 8 years at Procter & Gamble, 8 years with Warner Lambert, about 8 years with Dove Christian Fellowship, 10 years with Sight and Sound. And I've always felt like in terms of assignments and work that if you change too often, you never really get to bear fruit. It'd be like planting a tomato and moving it every 2 weeks, and nothing would ever happen. And I always felt like I was long enough in each assignment that there was some fruit. I could look back, so I'm proud of that. Both being faithful to the assignments and seeing some fruit from each of them. Success will be if I stand before the Lord and I see Beth being rewarded richly by the Lord, and the children being rewarded richly by the Lord. That probably will be the hallmark time. Some of the memories of adulthood that are the fondest, I think, have to revolve around times with my wife. I think the time in Santorini where our oldest son was married was a fond memory. Times with the children, I think a trip to Florida that we took in 1988, going to the Outer Banks.
All I'm trying to find out is what's the guy's name on first base.
No, what's on second?
I'm not asking you about second.
Well,
I'm asking you about who's on first.
well,
Or who's on second.
I think you missed.
So who's on second?
I feel like for the whole family, we've enjoyed the time together and the freedom from all of our work schedules, our athletic schedules, our activity schedules, and our commitments, and to be alone with the Lord and each other. The most painful life experience I had was seeing or experiencing the loss, if you will, of Stacy Lynn, our child. At the same time, the Lord used it. I can remember clearly in 2 Samuel, I think it's chapter 12 and verse 20, says when David lost a child, he got up, changed his clothes, washed his face, went into the temple and worshiped God. And I felt that while she passed on to be with the Lord taught us as a family, or me individually, to do just the same thing. When you're experiencing a loss, get up, wash your face, change your clothes, go into the temple and worship God. And I feel like he removed all of the grief, and in the end, really the question was, would you have conceived the child and seen that child in heaven, or not conceive the child at all? And all of a sudden, what was very painful sort of allowed me to become very appreciative of life in any form. The hobbies in my life that I've appreciated, I love golf pretty much all my life. When I was young, I remember playing baseball for 10 years and playing baseball on my high school baseball team, made varsity team in 10th grade, and I enjoyed that, but realized I wasn't going to be an athlete. So probably, golf is what's lived with me the longest. I like to think that I could have played tennis at one time in my life, but certainly enjoy spectating the children playing, being involved with whatever sport they take up. I love potato chips. Food. I love all kind of food. I don't know if I have a favorite. I have lots of favorites. Too many favorites. Food and football. It's a party. I think about football, the thing I love is the competitiveness of it, the unscriptedness of it, the spontaneity of it. Anything can happen on any given play. Life is like that. Things switch and things change, and so that becomes the drama, and I think I enjoy that. The most meaningful thing is accepting the Lord. It's on a scale by itself, and obviously at the age of 26, when I became a Christian, was the keystone to my life, which changed it around and filled a void. The biggest influence on my life, people I've come in contact with who've known and served the Lord. I have to say that Ray Wernberg has been a big influence in my life. He was several years older than me, not many, but 6 or 7. And he served as a brother and showed me the way and walked it. Dave Hannon, who taught the Word, I thought was just, he taught me to love the Lord and love His Word and appreciate His Word. And so Dave Hannon was a significant influence in my life. In addition to those two in terms of teaching us spiritually, my wife has to be really significant because of all of the ways she's influenced me throughout the 33 years of marriage. I would never be the same person today if it weren't for her. So I mean, she has to be number one. Well, my favorite book by far is the Bible. I have a favorite character in the Bible, and it's Joshua, because he took the promised land. He learned a lot of lessons in the desert, and when it was his turn to go, he went, and I appreciated his leadership skills. I would say, other than that, I really appreciated Watchman Nee. I've read probably most of the things he's written, and been the most significant works probably I've read. My favorite quote is, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." I meditated on that Psalm 23 for 1 year, just knowing that He's there, that He leads, feeds, cares for, protects me day in and day out. Will be with me till I see Him face to face. I would think that my most valuable character trait might be, I'd like to think it's love, but I'm not sure. That in this sense that, we all express love different ways. Sometimes I express love in a way that I think fewer people appreciate. But it's not necessarily the warm fuzzies always, and I think my sense of justice, my sense of priority, my sense of desire to walk with the Lord might be some of the things that I would think are meaningful. The thing that strikes me most about our society are the generation is very much an instant gratification generation. Things that took a half a year or a year today occur in literally a day or two. I'll give you an example. If it's communications, building a project, building a building, things that just seem to take forever, postage, getting a letter to and from a friend, would take a week. Today, 2 clicks on the mouse and that's all different. So the pace, the rate of change is probably the biggest single difference I could see in society. It's certainly beneficial if you know where you're going. It's certainly not if you don't. I mean, it gives a lot of opportunity to get off the track very fast or to make significant progress very quickly. So whether it's technologically in medicine, scientific advancements, they can happen rapidly and really for the good. On the other hand, 2 clicks on an internet and a child is exposed to pornography that just wouldn't have been available in seconds when I was a child. Obviously, since I was born, TV has come into play, space travel, the elimination of polio, and so many medical advances. But the thing that's changed to me, the whole globe, and turning it into a global society, has to be the computer, the advent of the computer and the internet. I think a common acceptance today is the notion that unbridled tolerance is the appropriate response. That everything is okay, I'm okay, you're okay, and whatever you believe is you know what you believe, and I think that's silly. And God has a lot of absolutes in His Word, and yet He's not bigoted and He's not limiting, but there are certain things in terms of design and the way we are by nature and as human beings that will work and won't work. It's like anything, it's like a car. There's certain things you do, you don't do. If you don't put oil in it, the engine will be ruined. I don't care how good of a driver you are. And that's just the way it's designed. And I think, in our own lives, acceptance of sin, evil, homosexuality, obviously, I think probably the biggest, one of the biggest things in our nation is the matter of life. Where is life? What is life? When does it start? I believe it starts at conception. And I believe harming an embryo and harming a fetus is a real abomination. It's a Holocaust and it's terrorism in our own right. And since 1973, that's probably been the most deleterious event, is the taking of our own nation's future and our own children, so to speak. Oh, if I picture the world 200 years from now, I'm thinking that it's so technically proficient and so unloving. Sort of like the Bible says, in the end, in those days, the love of many will grow cold. And I think somehow we're trusting each other less and less because of events that are happening. And I think it's going to be more and more black and white, if you will. Those that do and those that don't. Those that care for each other and those that don't. Those that love each other and those that harm each other. And I don't think we'll be separated by nationality or geography or politics as much as we will by those that are looking to harm each other and those that are looking not to harm each other. The thing I would fear most 200 years from now, without being funny, is that Jesus wouldn't be back yet. Because I feel like I don't know how much we can continue to go. Most important lesson I've ever learned in my life is forgive. The picture I have of forgiveness is reaching into a bird cage and taking the bird and letting it go out a window. Releasing it. Don't hold on to yesterday. Don't hold on to things that happen. Life's unjust. Unfair things happen. Unexpected things happen. Things that aren't right and aren't fair. Because we live amongst 5 billion people that make lots of choices. And holding on to unforgiveness just brings a bitterness into our life. And somebody once said, not forgiving is like drinking poison thinking it's going to adversely affect the other person. The characteristic trait I admire the most is in my wife, and it's mercy. I just find that over and over she said, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And I don't find myself as a very mercy-motivated person. It's probably why I appreciate it the most in her. There's a verse in Philippians that says that He is at work in us, both to will and to do His own good pleasure. And it's a prayer I pray often, thanking Him that He is at work in us, both to will and to do His own good pleasure. He loved God. That would work. Or he served God. Or God used him. I think that's the most important thing. You know, we give our life for so many things, and I feel like someday I stand before the Lord, if I haven't served my wife, served our children in whatever way we could, then I don't know that I've done the highest priority thing in life.